Joining me right now on the telecast is Ross Feingold. Thank you, Ross, for joining me. And my first question with regards to the very complicated domestic politics of Philippines. Here's a look at how there was a vice president that was picked under the Ferdinand government when Ferdinand took over from Duterte on the condition that Duterte's daughter be kept as vice president. So there were cordial relations between both the leaders up until very recently when Ferdinand allowed for the ICC arrest warrant to be implemented in his state.
Previously, Ferdinand Marcos, who won the presidential election in 2022, had good relations with former President Rodrigo Duterte. And as you mentioned, in the 2022 election, Rodrigo Duterte's daughter, Sara Duterte, ran as a team with Ferdinand Marcos. And at the time, most people believed that this showed a large amount of compromise between these two powerful political families, and that it would facilitate Sara Duterte running as Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s successor in the 2028 election, because the Filipino president can only serve one term. Unfortunately for the two families, they had a falling out. There's a lot of bad blood. Sara Duterte has been impeached by the Filipino Congress, so that process is working its way through. And now we have the President Marcos Jr. okaying the extradition of Duterte to the International Criminal Court. So this is very much an ongoing issue. It's far from settled. And what the ultimate result for domestic Filipino politics will be is also very much an unknown.
Right, absolutely. But let's take a look at the quote-unquote crimes against humanity on which Duterte is charged with. Talking about the alleged 30,000 deaths, these executions that took place, where it is being reported that Duterte, as the president, hired criminals to kill these drug cartels, people on influential positions, the kingpins, the other operators of the drug cartels that were operational in Philippines. 30,000 of them is the alleged figure. 6,000 is the figure that stands, the official at this point of time, the figure as per the reports. So here it is, the argument being put by Duterte that he was cleansing Philippines from the huge drug cartels that were being operated. So why is it that he is being charged? So do you think this argument will hold in The Hague?
This is probably not going to be a winning argument in The Hague. He could say he was the elected president, which is true. He could say he had a mandate from the public to conduct this war on drugs. But if the International Criminal Court or the prosecutors of the International Court believe that he has violated international human rights law, then they're going to bring a case against him, which is exactly what they've done. The interesting thing there is that he was, as I said, President Duterte was very popular. His war on crime and war on drugs was very popular as well, except for the people whose relatives were killed extrajudiciously, as well as human rights organizations and lawyers, which also objected. But the vast majority of the public was generally okay with the way he conducted this drug war, and he retained his popularity throughout most of his tenure as president. He took a lot of criticism for the way COVID-19 was handled, but much less criticism for the way the war on drugs was handled.
Okay, let's also understand from you, in wake of the kind of smooth transition that happened from President Duterte handing over the power, and it was Ferdinand Marcos Jr. who took over, and like you said, there were cordial relations. The vice president was, the transfer of power happened, the transition happened on the condition that Sara Duterte continued to remain the vice president, and this was adhered to by the Ferdinand government. So what has gone wrong in the recent few months that has then forced Ferdinand to turn his back on Duterte? And mind you, Philippines has withdrawn itself from the ICC, and despite that, Ferdinand has allowed for the ICC forces to enter into Philippines and allow for the arrest warrant to be executed.
Arguably, under Filipino law, it was still possible to hand over a suspect to the International Criminal Court. There arguably are provisions in Filipino law that are applicable, notwithstanding that, as you said, the Philippines did withdraw from the Rome Statute in the ICC. But going back to the falling out between the Marcos family and the Duterte family, maybe this was inevitable because they're both very powerful families. And Sara Duterte, the vice president, and Rodrigo Duterte's daughter, she has her eye on winning the election in 2028. And everything she does publicly as vice president is really with an eye towards being a candidate and winning the 2028 election. And maybe that didn't sit so well with Ferdinand Marcos Jr., who still has many years to go until 2028, and he's no longer president. And there's also allegations that Marcos Jr. would prefer one of his relatives to win the election in 2028 rather than Sara Duterte. So that's also a factor in the falling out.
All right. Thank you, Ross, for joining me and sharing your views on this matter.